Massachusetts Peace Action webinar on Haiti. My name is Jovenel. I'm the co-chair of the Latin America and Caribbean Working Group of Massachusetts Peace Action. I want to thank everyone that helped organizing this webinar, and a special thank you to our guest of honor, Teri Mattson from CODEPINK, that will be the moderator, and Pierre Labossiere from Haiti Action Committee, and Robert Roth, also from the Haiti Action Committee. Each one of them will give a presentation, and then we will open the floor to question and answer. So please send us your question in the chat. Try to make the question short, and that will facilitate the conversation. Before I give the microphone to Teri, I would like to invite you to join us at a rally on July 28th outside the Haitian consulate in Boston. July 28th is the 106th anniversary of the first US invasion of Haiti in 1915 that led to a 20 years occupation and turning Haiti into a US protectorate. So thank you again, everybody. And Teri, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yoav, and thank you to Mass Peace Action. What an honor to be with you this evening. And I'm very, I'm pleased to see so many of you attending tonight. Really wonderful to see how many of you are interested in the current situation in Haiti, but also we're going to talk about the historical, give you some historical context as well, because it's, as I was mentioning to everyone before we went live, for those of us who have been working in Latin America for a good part of our lives, we don't talk about Haiti enough. And for most of us, I think we would tell you that Haiti is the first country in the Americas we should be talking about when we talk about democracy, liberation, anti-colonialism, anti-imperialism, all those themes. Haiti was the first example and continues to be an example, and we should overtly celebrate that. So tonight, I'm really pleased to be sharing this program with two very good friends of mine from the Haiti Action Committee from in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. We've done a lot of work over the years together, including delegations to Haiti. So I want you to meet two friends, two passionate activists. Pierre Labossiere, he's a veteran labor and human rights activist. In 1991, he co-founded the Haiti Action Committee, in solidarity with the popular movement in Haiti struggling to restore democracy after the military coup against President Aristide. Pierre is also a board member of the Haiti Emergency Relief Fund. And also, we're going to be hearing from Robert Roth this evening. And Robert is a co-founder of the Haiti Action Committee as well. He was a high school history teacher in San Francisco for 30 years and is now an instructional coach for new teachers. He's a lifelong activist. He was part of the Central America Solidarity Movement in the 1980s and 1990s and has worked for years to free political prisoners in the United States. So welcome, gentlemen. It's an honor to be sharing this program with you this evening. We're going to have Pierre start for the audience tonight. We've asked him to give, I guess we should say, a succinct historical overview of Haiti. You should all know that Pierre is Haitian born and raised. And so we're very fortunate to have his view on things this evening. And Robert will join in as necessary, and then during our initial comments, but we're also going to give the floor to Robert after Pierre's presentation. So everyone, I want you to meet Pierre Labossiere, and welcome. And Pierre, please tell us, please start with a little bit of your personal history. I think it's really important for the audience to understand who you are. And then let's go through a quick, succinct history of Haiti for our audience.
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you so much. And Massachusetts-based Action, thank you very much for organizing this, Teri. A real pleasure to be with you again. And to start with, as Teri mentioned, I was born in Haiti, and at the age of 14, I left, came to the United States, particularly in New York, where I spent my teenage years, and then moved to California later on as an adult. But I've been taking frequent trips to Haiti, working closely with grassroots organizations on the ground in terms of solidarity, because Haiti has to be transformed from where it is today to a land of, it needs to become a land of peace, a land of justice, and a land of, and I mean by justice, social, economic justice, and a land of equality, just as our foremothers and forefathers had envisioned it. And many people on the ground, when you mention to them what the movement is all about, they will tell you it's a movement to complete the Haitian Revolution that our foremothers and forefathers had started. And I emphasize our foremothers because all too often the patriarchal writings on Haitian history exclude the role of the women or the presence of the women. And the women, when you look at what the French officers, the French army, the veterans from the French troops who had fought against the African men and women fighting for independence and freedom, they are quick to mention how in battle the women were more ferocious than the men. And so, and this is directly from the Black Jacobins, the book by C.L.R. James, which is a book I highly recommend. So how did Haiti get here today? And why did I as a Haitian have to move to New York? One of the things that this is particularly an example of the kind of forces that are pushing. And here we can look at the issue of present day, the refugee issue, though today they call it immigration or migrants. But I prefer the term of refugees. Forces on the ground are pushing, continue to push Haitians away from their land. And at the time when I left in 1970, it was the dictatorship of Papa Doc Duvalier. And everyone, and that's Francois Duvalier, was a country doctor, and he was illegally put in power by the US government that imposed him onto the people of Haiti and imposed this kind of dictatorship that really made Haiti, that started the decline, basically, of Haiti, the decline that we are seeing today. And so Duvalier was a departure from the vision of our foremothers and forefathers who believe in a land of equality and democracy. And I mentioned that because Duvalier, even though he quoted Dessalines a lot, he talked Black power, but it was just a ruse so that he could do the bidding of US imperialism. So very similar to Mobutu Sese Seko in Africa, taking a nationalist, saying nationalist things, but really Black nationalist things, but in a sense, it was a cover so that they could do the bidding of US imperialism in a much better way and try and fool people both domestically and internationally. Of Haiti, of course, I want to pay tribute to the original Arawaks and the Taínos and the Caribs who inhabited the island. And as you know, Christopher Columbus claimed that he had discovered the island, which is a ridiculous claim. It would be as if in 1970 I would come to America and say that I discovered it. And so I want to pay tribute to the native, the indigenous communities, the indigenous nations that were wiped out following the genocidal war of Christopher Columbus. And he started bringing, kidnapping our people, not him particularly, but many of the Spanish colonizers started bringing in, kidnapping our people from the African continent and bringing them to work in the various plantations that were being established. First to dig for gold, and secondly, to work on the plantations. So I'll skip forward very quickly. I can jump to 1791, major uprising of the against the system of slavery. But who were these Africans? They were people from stable societies. It would be as if the Nazis had successfully carried out centuries of enslavement and later on tried to tell you, well, those people who enslaved had no history, they had no beginning, they had no culture. And of course, because the Nazis only lasted what, maybe at the most 10 years, in there also everybody would say, oh, this is fanciful. However, because it lasted so long in Africa, and they were so good at doing this, and it lasted centuries, and they were so good at putting out lies, so many people would say, well, the Africans had no culture, and repeat the lies of the colonizers and the lies of the enslavers. But our people knew better, because at the time of the revolution, 1791, almost 2/3 of the enslaved African population had been born in Africa. They knew different. And in preparation for the uprising, they had a vision, which wasn't only to break their chains, but also to take over the land, to free the land, as we would say today, and create a new nation. And this was from the grassroots movement. And I'm saying this, putting in context today's Lavalas movement. Today, the movement is called Lavalas, but it is a continuation of this historical movement of our people for liberation, for justice, for dignity, for democracy, and for sovereignty, self-determination. So in order to understand the Lavalas movement, the movement of the people today, we have to look at the past. And very quickly, I want to let you know that after a 13-year war of liberation, our African foremothers and forefathers, and I want to emphasize that again, they declared themselves a free and independent nation and didn't stop there. They proclaimed Haiti to be a sanctuary nation, inviting oppressed people, Africans, enslaved Africans, indigenous people, and anyone fighting for freedom and against this odious system of colonialism and slavery to come to Haiti, and Haiti would recognize them as Haitian citizens and defend their freedom. And so right after the Haitian Revolution, these Africans who had fought for their freedom and proclaimed to the world their determination to live free, actually envisioned the struggle against colonialism and slavery. And so they went on to fight in South America, in Central America, with Bolivar. Bolivar came and requested assistance. And the president at the time, first it was Dessalines, who was the head of state, and President Pétion later on offered him the weapons, the ships, and the ammunition. Twice he was defeated and came back, and Haiti provided him with that. I will close with this, and I don't want to, because I could go on and on about it, but I just want to close with this. What was the response of the enslaving, of the slave empires to Haiti? Well, the response was to try to destroy it, to prevent it from developing. And so one of the first things they did, and remember, this is the same thing that's being applied against Cuba, it was an economic embargo. The US, as a slave society, as an enslaver nation, refused to recognize Haitian independence. And so they sided with the French and the British and everyone else and demanded that Haiti pay reparations to the former plantation owners. Now, this is the beginning. Connect that with the debt today. It's by no accident that you see former colonies of those enslaved nations having a debt that they have to pay. For centuries, they have been colonized, their wealth stolen, and yet to this day, they are the ones who end up having to owe money to the people who stole their wealth, and not the other way around. And so this is this forced demand, this forced, how should I say, this extortion of monies from Haiti to repay French slave owners is actually, this is one of the things that contributed to really the impoverishment of Haiti, of the people of Haiti. Haiti is by no means a poor country. Haiti is by no means the most impoverished nation. The people of Haiti are among the most robbed people in the Americas. And so I'll stop right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. I want to remind all of you watching this evening, if you have questions, to please put your questions in the chat. We're going to have our second speaker talk for about 20 minutes, and that will leave 20 minutes plus or minus for all of your questions and then some answers. And we really encourage you to participate in the Q&A section of this program, because there's so much to share about Haiti, and there's so much for all of us participating tonight to learn. So please be open with your questions. So with that, I want to welcome our second guest, Robert Roth. And Robert is also with the Haiti Action Committee, as I mentioned when we opened the program. So Robert, why don't you give us a little bit of the current context as we all woke up to the assassination of Jovenel Moise a week ago Wednesday. And so I'll let you take it from there, and also tie in some of the historical context with what happened on Wednesday.
Okay, thank you very much, Teri. And I just want to say something about Pierre, who is one of the real great historians of Haiti in terms of the history of Haiti. And, you know, to ask Pierre to speak about Haiti, but the history of Haiti in 10 minutes is a little daunting, because he could go on for hours. And I want to add a little to what Pierre said before jumping into the current situation. Like in Haiti Action Committee, we see the roots of the current situation as stemming from the coups against the democratically elected Aristide administrations, both in 1991 and then again in 2004. And those coups represent a continuation of the history that Pierre was talking about, which includes an occupation, a direct US occupation of Haiti from 1915 to 1934, an occupation that ended up slaughtering about 30,000 people in its wake, suppressing a massive peasant rebellion. And this was at the same time as peasant movements in El Salvador and in Nicaragua were also challenging elite rule. And one of the things the US was doing when it came in was to firm up the rule of the elite in Haiti, as well as to take direct control over Haitian finances. One of the first things that they did was they came in right before the invasion. US officials, US soldiers, Marines, walked into the National Bank of Haiti and took out of it $500,000 worth of gold. And during that period of time, and from 1825 on to 1947, Haiti was paying back the debt that Pierre talked about. First to the French, and then US banks took over the debt. And in the process, first thing that Haiti had to do when France demanded, in order for France put warships in Haitian waters in 1825, demanding that Haiti pay restitution for freeing itself from slavery. And that debt amounted to $21.7 billion that Haiti had to pay up and through the 1940s. The first act in terms of repaying the debt, Haiti had to close its school system, like in order to pay the debt to France. And at times, 80% of the national budget was going to France and then to US banks. So when Pierre says that Haiti is a country that has been made poor, that has been robbed and exploited versus this, what we consider to be a part of a racist trope about Haiti, that Haiti is just poor, it's dysfunctional, it's chaotic. All of those things which are in the mainstream media today in the wake of Jovenel Moise's assassination are part of a white supremacist narrative about the history of Haiti. And it's a narrative that denies two things. Number one, it denies the role of imperial and colonial control over Haiti that has produced the situation that Haitians face today. And the second thing that it denies is it denies the beauty of the popular movement in Haiti, the resistance that has always taken place in Haiti, and the accomplishments of that movement. So when Pierre talks about Labossiere and the administrations of Jean-Bertrand Aristide, who was the first democratically elected president in Haiti's history in 1990 and took office in 1991, and from February to September began the first democratic administration in Haiti's history, which was summarily destroyed on September 30th by a US-sponsored coup. When Aristide was reelected again in 2000, again the United States intervened in 2004 to destroy that administration. It didn't only mean ousting Aristide, it meant getting rid of over 8,000 elected officials in Haiti, and it meant thwarting the gains of that administration, which had built more schools than in the entire history of Haiti, which had sent health clinics into rural areas, which had built parks in the poorest neighborhood in Haiti with lighting so that people could actually read or socialize under lights in the poorest communities. The Aristide government spent more on healthcare and education than had ever been spent in the history of Haiti. It incorporated women's rights as a standard for its practices in Haiti, giving credit to women farmers in order for them to be able to grow their food and sell their produce. All of this and more, it doubled the minimum wage, raised taxes on the elite for the first time. These were the reasons that the United States government looked at Aristide as a bad example to the rest of the Americas, to Central America, to all of Latin America, and was determined to crush that experiment in democracy. And 17 years later, we see the fruits of that. We see the bitter fruits of that in the situation that Haitians now face. Since the overthrow of the Aristide government and a UN occupation supported and orchestrated by the US, France, and Canada, what's happened in Haiti? The economy has gotten worse. Food insecurity is off the charts. Paramilitary forces called gangs in the mainstream media here, which is one of the tropes about Haiti, is that all of this is gang warfare and violence and chaos. The way in which like white supremacists talk about the Black community in this country is the way that mainstream media talks about Haiti. The reality is that this government, under the control and with the support of the United States, has weaponized these gangs in communities to attack the popular movement, to attack opposition. And over the last number of years, since both the Martelly government came to power in 2011, backed by the United States, and then Jovenel Moise came to power in 2000 in a series of fraudulent elections in 2016, again, organized, orchestrated by the United States, the situation has spiraled downward. The UN occupation, which came into being after the overthrow of Aristide, brought with it a cholera epidemic, that killed over 10,000 Haitians as UN forces polluted one of the key rivers in Haiti, leading to a massive cholera outbreak, and Haiti had not had cholera before this. The UN forces committed rampant sexual exploitation against women, girls, and boys in Haiti, to the extent that it became common knowledge, and then they left the children that were produced by those rapes in the hands of Haitian mothers while they left the country after the ending of their shift. So this was the result of foreign occupation. Moise's government, had completely, in the last period of time, had completely lost whatever minimal popular support it had. A few months ago, Moise himself said, "I have millions of enemies in Haiti." The mass movement in Haiti, the Labossiere movement and other forces, had been in the streets for months on end, hundreds of thousands of people in the streets demanding an end to the dictatorship. Moise was ruling by decree. Parliament did not exist at all. Mayors, all of the elected mayors were removed and appointed then by Moise. In other words, this was a total dictatorship control over the political system in Haiti. Okay, so that brings us to the assassination. And one of the things around this assassination, if you read the papers, and we're not in a position to explain the ins and outs of this particular event because the event is still unfolding. But what's clear is that this was an internecine battle within the elite, many of whom, like whether it was US-backed politicians, whether it was Moise's own security force, whether it was major parts of the oligarchy, there were differences with Moise, and a violent regime met a violent end. As Malcolm X once famously said, about the Kennedy assassination in relation to the violence that the US was wreaking all over the world in 1963, both in Vietnam, the Congo, and here at home, he said, chickens have come home to roost. And in Haiti, that's really true, is that a violent, dictatorial, repressive regime has met a violent end. And this end was not produced by the movement in Haiti, which has staged like hundreds and hundreds of mostly peaceful demonstrations attacked violently by police. All right, this was a heavily financed operation with, Colombian ex-military, a Haitian American doctor is now, under arrest in Haiti. People who had participated in the coup against Aristide are being looked for. This was a battle among thieves. The key thing for us as solidarity activists is to focus on both the dangers ahead and how to support the popular movement. The danger is that the US, the UN, and what's called the core group, which is a grouping of nine nations, including, well, it includes the UN, OAS, Brazil, France, Canada, and a few other countries, and the European Union. These are the people that are controlling the politics in Haiti. The danger in this situation is that they'll tighten the control in the name of bringing stability to Haiti. The same kind of justification that they used to bring US troops into Haiti in 1915, or to bring in the UN occupation after the overthrow of Aristide and his kidnapping to the Central African Republic. All right, so that's one of the dangers, and we have to oppose US intervention, UN intervention. Some people still believe that the UN is a peacekeeping force in these situations. Nothing could be further than the truth. In Haiti, the UN led the repression against the popular movement. It consolidated the control of the coup, and it prevented the democratic movement from organizing and from sustaining itself. In spite of that, the movement is remarkably strong and resilient. This movement that Pierre was talking about, has existed since the time of the fight against Duvalier. And in spite of 2 coups, in spite of foreign occupation, in spite of massive repression and incarceration, the movement still exists. What is its major demand? Its major demand right now is that there be no more phony elections under US control, that the elections that put in place Michel Martelly and Jovenel Moise, which were condemned by the movement in Haiti as electoral coups, that we can't have another one in Haiti. There can't be another imposed election on the people of Haiti, that instead there needs to be what the movement there is called salut public, which is a government of public safety, a transition government towards real democracy in Haiti that would bring together major sectors of Haitian society, including like the key forces in the opposition movement. That would include the Labossiere party of President Aristide, not exclusively, but would include them in a process of then stabilizing the country, bringing security back to the people of Haiti, ending this horrific wave of massacres and kidnapping, and setting the stage for free and fair elections. But none of that can happen under this current right-wing government, whether it's Claude Joseph or a new prime minister or a big-time senator who's also in the pay of the US. It has to come from the grassroots. It has to come from the people. And so that, for Haiti Action Committee, that's who we support. We support the popular grassroots movement in Haiti, and we support the demand for a transition led by that movement to bring, again, a return to the democratic motion that was in place under the Aristide administrations and was interrupted by this endless series of US and UN interventions. So I'll stop there, and I'm sure that people have many questions and comments. And again, thank you for having us here, because I'd say one more thing, which is that Haiti, not enough eyes are on Haiti in our movement, and not enough voices are raised. And one of the things that happens is there's an earthquake in Haiti, and which was a horrific earthquake. And then for a moment, people look at Haiti, or the 2004 coup for a moment, but then the eyes drift away, and the understanding that this movement has lessons for all of us. This movement should teach us what democracy is about, what a progressive social change can take place in the Caribbean, in the Americas. It's a very important movement for us to understand, to learn from, and support. So we hope that this webinar is not the end, but represents a beginning of increased solidarity with Haiti. And now I'll stop.
Thank you, Robert. And I have to say, I love the emphasis on movement building. And I know you and Pierre and I have talked about the importance of movement building and how that is important to political sustainment, whether a party is in power or out of power. And I would propose to those of you at Mass Peace Action that maybe there be an educational webinar about movement building and what's happening throughout the Americas regarding movement building. So thank you, both of you. We've got a lot of questions and comments in the chat. So let me go to the top and put some of these to both of you. Okay, so you all see the comment about Black Jacobins as being a book to read. Okay, here, this is from Jean. When did the payments to France for reparations end? is it possible to get France to repay those outrageous payments?
Pierre. I think you're muted.
Yeah, unmute yourself.
Okay.
There you go.
Yes, the payment started, I believe that was on 1826. And that's when they started. And they, as Robert mentioned, it wasn't until 1946, 1947 that Haiti was able to finally finish paying that. And someone had mentioned a book. President Aristide has written several books, but one of them that I will show right here is called Eyes of the Heart. And this one is really, really a fantastic book. And the subtitle of it is Seeking a Path for the Poor in the Age of Globalization. And I believe in 2012, also President Aristide wrote a book on mental decolonization, philosophical reflections for mental decolonization. Those are some among the many other books that he has written. And if people want to understand Haiti, I would highly recommend those. There is another book also by Randall Robinson. Many people may remember Randall Robinson of Trans-Africa Movement. He wrote a superb book, and the book is called An Unbroken Agony, Haiti from Revolution to the Kidnapping of a President. Unbroken Agony, Haiti from Revolution to the Kidnapping of a President. And those books, I believe, will help you really understand. And someone mentioned Paul Farmer's book earlier, The Uses of Haiti. So having said all of this, I just want to say that, yes, and Robert really covered the payments to France and later on to the US. And those payments, as he mentioned, really very much, instead of the monies that were being produced by the Haitian people, the Haitian peasantry, who paid those taxes, who paid that money to the French? It was the peasantry. The people who were producing the wealth, working the land, they were heavily taxed by successive repressive Haitian governments, and along with US-supported governments that extorted high taxes out of them. So monies that they were paying in taxes, instead of being given back to them in terms of building schools, building hospitals, giving them clean sources of drinking water, providing resources for them to invest in agriculture. Those monies were being invested, were being sent to France, and also they were being used to maintain a military which was working just like the colonial armies of during the old colonial system to repress the population and force people to work in this abominable system. So I'll stop right there.
Thank you, Pierre. So we have a question here from Margaret. How do you account for the very different trajectories of Haiti and the Dominican Republic? And I think, Margaret, your question trailed off, but who share the same island, two countries with very different trajectories. And I suspect that has to do with debt payment and colonialism. But so the question is, how do you account for the very different trajectories of the two countries, Haiti and DR?
Pierre, why don't you take that? I'll take the next one.
Oh, okay. But I don't want to leave you out, Robert.
That's
well, up to, I would say this. This needs to be re-examined, the history of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, you see. And for the sake of brevity, let me say this. It was all one under first the Spanish and later on when the French came. So the part that is today the Dominican Republic was the colony of Spain. And when Haiti became, and it was all united because Toussaint Louverture was Governor General of the entire island. And so what has happened is there was slavery taking place in the eastern side, which is the way they used to refer to it. And in 1822, the people of that part of the island rebelled and asked free Haiti to come and help out in the struggle. So Haiti was able to successfully go there and then abolish slavery. Now, bringing it to the present, up to the 1940s, I remember, well, I wasn't born at the time, but my dad used to tell me that the Dominican Republic, under the dictatorship of Trujillo, many Dominican refugees used to come to Haiti, you see, in seeking refuge. And so Haiti supported them. So it wasn't until the dictatorship of Duvalier that you started seeing a marked difference in the development, whereas Duvalier was focused on destroying the development of Haiti. And but later on in the Dominican Republic, it didn't have the same negative influence of a Duvalier system that kept, that stole everything the people were producing and that underdeveloped the country of Haiti. And this decline of Haiti has been continuing since 1957, since the time of Papa Doc and Baby Doc Duvalier, and continuing to the present. Now, President Aristide, when he came to office, stopped that decline momentarily to try to make Haiti regain its, and was well, we were on our way. But then the US and the UN, with two coups d'etats, again, drove us back, took us back into the bottom of the pit, where we are trying now to fight to get back, to restore, put Haiti on the path to development. A development that will be based on investir dans l'humain, investing in people, meaning providing for our people to have a decent life. Go ahead, Robert, sorry.
So our next question is from Margot. Did you want to add something,
No,
Robert,
no,
before I
no,
propose the
no.
next question? Okay, great, thank you. What is the best way we in the United States can help Haitians now?
Well, I think that the first thing is to look at it as solidarity and not as charity, and, you know, not about it, like we have to march with them, you know, not for Haitians. You know, Haitians are leading an incredible struggle right now for democracy, for human rights, for healthcare, for education, all of these things. And for us here in the United States, number one, we have to educate ourselves about Haiti. And that means identifying and rejecting all of the racist tropes about Haiti and really learning the history and learning the current history of Haiti. That's one. The second thing is that we have to really make Haiti an issue for our own government. We have to say that, you know, no intervention, no more intervention in Haiti. Stop supporting with US funds, with taxpayer dollars. Stop supporting the development of this repressive police force that has been terrorizing the people of Haiti, or the new army that has been built under Jovenel Moise and Michel Martelly. One of the main things that the Aristide administrations did was that they disbanded the Haitian army, which was remarkable for, you know, here, like we're talking to Massachusetts Peace Action. And in terms of the development of peaceful change, of an approach inside a country, you know, to not have an army, to say that the Haitian army, that the funds that were being used to develop the Haitian army were basically being used against the Haitian people. And that instead of that, that money, all of that process should go towards social and economic progress. Okay, so we have to oppose the US support for dictatorship, for fake elections in Haiti. We have to write to our Congress people. There's a big initiative right now inside Congress. I think it was 60, right? Pierre, 60 congressional members signed,
Yes,
you know,
68.
a letter, 68, demanding, you know, that the US not push these fake elections. You know, the Moise government was also trying to change the Haitian constitution to give more powers to the president and to make it possible for Moise or for another member of the PHTK to again, you know, control Haitian politics. So we have to oppose those initiatives and we have to support this demand of the popular movement. for a true transition. The other thing is that if people want to contribute materially to progress in Haiti, like we both work with the Haiti Emergency Relief Fund, and I see that one of the people on this webinar is Michelle Carchan, who has done tremendous work in Haiti and in support of this institution called Unifa, which is the University of the Dr. Aristide Foundation, and is an amazing university that has been that was taken over, that had started before the coup and then was shuttered during the coup, with 247 medical students forced to flee. That university is now operating again, in spite of all the conditions that we've talked about. And there's a few thousand students. They've graduated hundreds of doctors, lawyers. It's the first school of physical therapy in the country, a dental school, an agronomy school. So in the group that both Pierre and I are part of, the Haiti Emergency Relief Fund, we support that kind of work in Haiti. We take no money goes to staff. We don't have a staff. Everything goes directly to Haiti. So, at the end of this webinar, we should give you information about how to contact both the Haiti Action Committee and the Haiti Emergency Relief Fund. So I think all of those are things that people can do.
Robert, can you quickly tell our audience what UNIFA is?
Yeah, Unifa is a university. It's a university,
Aristide, and created by Aristide.
Yes, created by
Aristide Foundation.
Yeah, and when the Aristides, both Jean-Bertrand Aristide and his wife and colleague Mildred Aristide, came back from exile. They were in exile, forced exile, for 7 years, from 2004 to 2011. And when they came back, and the only reason they were able to come back was there was a massive movement in Haiti and internationally to, allow them to return. And the first thing that they did upon their return was to reopen this university. And that's been their major project since they've been back. And it's, many of us have been there, and many of us have seen the amazing work that's being done there. And it's a lot of times we just think, oh, well, it's a university. It's a space in the middle of Haiti, a democratic space for Haitians to be able to pursue professional careers and not leave Haiti, but to then serve the people of Haiti. And so that's what Unifa is. It's a very important project. And there's many other examples of grassroots activists building that kind of work in Haiti in the face of all this repression and all of the dictatorship that we've been talking about. So support that work, and then keep demanding that the United States keep its hands off Haiti and off the political process in Haiti.
So let's switch from the United States to Canada. We've got a question here. What's in it for Canada to have wanted to see Aristide gone?
Canada was very involved in mining in Haiti, a number of Canadian firms. And Canada has been a very, very active partner with the US. In other words, Canada is there as part of US foreign policy and has been helping. And the way that the coup of 2004 started, it started early on, I believe in 2003, with what they call the Ottawa Initiative. That was a meeting in Ottawa, Canada, of the US and a number of countries to plot the overthrow of President Aristide. In addition to that, really to not only the overthrow of President Aristide, as Robert described, and by the way, I want to say, today is the birthday of President Aristide, and there has been quite a massive outpouring of support from people on the ground in Haiti. And this is and I'm mentioning this to let you know how the movement identifies very strongly with Brother Aristide, who we regard as our brother. So Canada was very involved in this. Canada has, along with the US, with the National Endowment for Democracy, has financed a number of phony organizations on the ground, right-wing student organizations, right-wing women's organizations, and right-wing unions, so that they could present a picture to the outside world that, oh, these are civil society organizations that are against President Aristide. Hello, Cuba. Does that sound familiar? This type of destabilization happening, it happened again it happened also under Allende in Chile. So Canada was very involved in that and continues. And Canada also has been part of training the Haitian police. And the Haitian police is one of the most brutal among the security forces in the Americas. And it's Canadian. So many times Canada doesn't have that face. People assume that Canada is very benign. However, they've been quite vicious in their actions in Haiti and in suppressing democracy and the rule of law.
I think this is one of the most important things omitted or missing when we talk about Haiti is the vast richness of natural resources, not just human resource, but the natural resources. And we don't seem to mention that when we talk about Haiti. I mean, we mention it when we talk about lithium in Bolivia and gold in Honduras, but Haiti is very, very rich in natural resources as well, which is another reason why it's been continually occupied as a colony for the last 300 years. So
yes, Haiti is very rich. Haiti has petroleum. I'll mention a few: uranium, iridium, bauxite, copper, marble. So Haiti has a lot of mineral resources, and many people exploit it. And that's one of the things President Aristide was determined to prevent, because he wanted to make sure that whatever contract was being assigned was being given away, that it had to follow a process, a legal process, in which the Haitian people would benefit from those contracts, and it would be done in an orderly manner. And that's another reason for the coup. So, Robert, let me throw that back at you. I know time is running short.
Well, I just wanted to mention one thing, which was that in an earlier question, which was about has Haiti ever tried, or I saw it in the chat, has Haiti ever tried to get the money back from France, for the payment on that debt? And one of the key reasons for the coup was that the Aristide government was beginning, a legal fight on the world level in the international court system to demand payment, to demand that France repay the $21.7 billion. And the French were not happy about it. And the French played a key role in the coup. The other thing that I saw up there on the chat was about the UN. Why would the UN be involved in that? And I think, it's a good question, but I think that, just because you put a blue helmet on a military force does not make it a peacekeeper. The UN did the occupation of Haiti at the behest of the US. And the various countries that were at the core of that occupation all got something from the US. Argentina was involved. Brazil was at the center of that occupation. Jordan occupied Cité Soleil, one of the poorest neighborhoods in Haiti, and committed was involved in one of the worst massacres, in Haiti right after the coup. So the UN was operating as an arm of US policy. And when if the UN is now I just read a Washington Post editorial that called for the UN to up its occupation of Haiti. Like, as progressive activists, we should beware of that. We should oppose that. Just because it's the UN, don't think that that's a benign force. In Haiti, it's been a vicious, repressive, reactionary force.
The use of the UN was part of the Clinton administration strategy, correct? Was to use the UN versus using direct US troop involvement. Yeah, and not just in Haiti. That was not just a Clinton
Yes, that's right.
strategy.
That's right.
It was a strategy used elsewhere as well.
That's right.
So here's a complex statement and question for both of you. Thankfully, the U.S. is reluctant to agree to the Haitian PMs. I'm not even sure he's really the current prime minister, given how he came to power a week ago Monday. But reluctant to agree to the Haitian prime minister's request to send U.S. troops. Yet somehow order must be established. Haitians must be able to go on with their lives. The previous UN occupation was meant to protect the bourgeoisie. They were not there for the people, as both of you have expressed. Given all the realities, what entity do you consider best equipped to establish order and rule of law? Do you see any hope for a change in U.S. Haitian policy? Which would
let me jump in. I'm sorry.
Are you reading it?
If you allow me. No.
No, please.
I'm watching the time here very quickly. I wanted to tell you this. We don't need the UN. The UN is there. The UN has been there since 2004. And they are doing, as Robert mentioned, the bidding of US foreign policy. When President Aristide was in office, we had less than 5,000, or there were about 5,000 policemen and women. They didn't have fancy weapons. They were accompanied by the population. And Haiti was much safer then than now, because the population was actively working with the police. About 1,500 of them had just batons, and the rest of them had no real, there was some militarized equipment, a small group of them, but then the overall majority, it was the population working with the police that made the nation safe and secure. But it was only when the US financed and trained and heavily provided weapons to Guy Philippe and creating a contra force that invaded Haiti and provided them not only logistics, but finance and everything else. And still they couldn't do the job because the population stood firm. Then the US, France, and Canada, their special forces came in and kidnapped President Aristide. And so since the UN has come in, we've had nothing but a series of wholesale massacres, as Robert mentioned, taking place in many poor communities. What was their crime? They were demanding that their vote be respected. They were demanding respect for democracy. They were demanding that the program that they had elected the government of Famille Lavalas to do, that was brutally stopped by the school, that this program be implemented and under President Aristide and the representatives they had elected. The UN came in as a thug, as a thief, as nothing but a mafia force to destroy Haiti's democracy, and has been doing that to the present. So what the Haitians are doing now, what people are saying, and Robert mentioned Salut Public, is to leave us alone. We can run the country. We have credible, competent people at all levels of society who can really make things happen. Elections took place in Haiti, credible democratic elections organized by Haitians, not by the UN. Ever since the UN has been there, none of these elections has been free, fair, democratic. It's always a demonstration election to show off to the world as if, well, people are in line to vote, but they create artificial lines. I observed one of them, and I saw they do it, creating unnecessary delays, having artificial lines so that photographs could be taken and shown to the world, oh, Haitians are voting. But the voting has been suppressed. People are not allowed to vote and to freely choose. They have already handpicked the people and imposed them. Dr. Maurice Narcisse of Famille Lavalas had won the elections in 2016, but they imposed Jovenel Moise. And I'll stop right there.
Thank you, Pierre. So we have a comment here. Is President Aristide willing to run again? And also, I want to just kind of add something to that. I think I read, correct me if I'm wrong, a week or so ago that Aristide was in Cuba seeking medical attention or a medical checkup. I want to be careful what I say, a medical checkup in Cuba, I think is what I heard. So can one or both of you tell us a little bit about what President Aristide is doing today, how he is, and how he views his political life?
Yeah, his health. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay.
Got it.
President Aristide's health is much better. And you see, in this itself is a tragedy. It's not that there is, by the way, the University of the Aristide Foundation, Unifa, is building a teaching hospital. I don't know if Robert had mentioned that earlier. And this hospital would allow for the doctors and the medical students to have direct participation and training. So this is the tragedy. Here is a country where President Aristide wouldn't have had to leave had the situation, had there been the monies from the earthquake, the monies that were stolen by the various NGOs, including the Clinton Bush Foundation, including the Red Cross, if those monies had been applied to build infrastructure, or if we had been left alone when the coup had not taken place, President Aristide would have been able to build hospitals, so he wouldn't have had to leave Haiti. But what has been going on is that in recent weeks, we've had nothing but complete chaos and disorder in which the Haitian police has been taking part, in which the death squad supported by the United Nations and the government of Jovenel Moise and the occupation, which is the occupation government, has been taking part and really made it to such an extent that the hospitals in Haiti didn't have supplies. And going to the hospital became quite a challenge. And when you got there, you couldn't get the right supplies. And also doctors and nurses being kidnapped or being shot at. So those conditions made it so that many Haitians cannot get good quality medical care in Haiti. And it's all the result of the coup d'etat of 2004 and the continuing United States, United Nations occupation of Haiti.
And just one more word is that President Aristide campaigned for Dr. Maurice Narcisse in the electoral campaign in 2016. So Famille Lavalas, which is his party, selected this very prominent and experienced woman to head its ticket, and Aristide campaigned for her all through neighborhoods, throughout Haiti. So, and his work has really been focused on building Unifa and building this hospital that Pierre talked about. So he's active politically, but Famille Lavalas is not just a one-person show. It's
a movement.
It's a movement, and it's a grassroots movement, and Aristide is a part of it.
I think here we are back to the theme of movement building. And I would just again reiterate to all of you at Mass Peace Action, we saw how a successful movement building was in Bolivia, and how, it built a party and raised political candidates from that party. And when the party was ousted in October of 2019, stayed intact and was able to come back into power November of 2020. So Bolivia is a really current example, but there's movement building happening across the Americas, and we really should talk about that more. I have something I think we could maybe close with, and this is something relative to all of us in the United States, and I know it's something I've asked you and Robert, Pierre and Robert, about personally and in other live conversations. So this is from Mario, and he says, why can we not, meaning we, the United States, like the African slaves in Haitian history, have the revolution that we need in order to take power away from the white supremacist elite that we allow to manipulate us and brutalize the rest of the world?
That is well said. That's my comment. That is well said, and solidarity with Haiti is just a part of that. It's a very important aspect, but it's part of that, and building a movement here, right, to change this society in the ways that comment raised is really critical, is what we're all trying to accomplish.
Can I just add, I really feel, I had a terrific conversation with Ajamu Baraka yesterday from Black Alliance for Peace. And we talked exactly about this white supremacy and what it is. And now in the United States, and I would argue since Barack Obama particularly, white supremacism is not just about some, white skin. It's a paradigm, it's a mindset. And we're really seeing today with the Biden administration that white supremacy, quote unquote, comes in all shapes and sizes, skin colors, gender orientation, all of it. And it's a mindset. And it's a really fantastic question. I don't, where do we start? Because that has to be dismantled before we can start dismantling all the other infrastructure that's causing so much pain around the world, and also is so expensive, it's harmful, to the US citizenship.
And let me emphasize this on that point. President Aristide's book, Philosophical Reflections for Mental Decolonization, that book came out in Creole, and that book is widely read in Haiti. It was snatched up, and every time they print it, it's gone. And this is really helping many of us who've been brainwashed through the colonial educational system in Haiti and also in different parts of the world to look with new eyes at who we are as a people and how racism, white supremacy has impacted both Black and white. And so, and various ethnic groups throughout the world. And it's time that we look at it and ask the questions and take it apart in order to make, to be able to dismantle it, as you said, Terry. So it comes from this kind of introspection and acting as a community, studying what is happening, all the many things that we were made that have become part of us inwardly, and that we have interiorized in order for us to be able to start dismantling this sickness that is affecting the entire world, many people throughout the world.
Yeah, and the US citizens themselves, because it's so expensive to maintain the structure, particularly the military. So,
and many times people will tell me, I will hear progressives that will tell me, well, Haiti doesn't count. And it's a very loaded.
It's like the #1 country we should be talking about.
It doesn't count. So that reflects a lot. That reflects this type of sickness that has become part of many progressives as well as people on the right.
Well, thank you, both of you, Robert and Pierre. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be in conversation with you. I always learn so much, and I just love being in your presence. I want to welcome back Joel Alensky from Mass Peace Action to tell the audience a few ways you can get involved as an activist.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Pierre and Robert and Teri, for an amazing learning experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think after what you said, I don't need to add much. I just need to tell you, come to a rally on July 28th in front of the Haitian embassy in Boston. And we are going to walk from there half a mile to JFK building, which is the federal building in Boston, to demand end UN intervention, solidarity with the people of Haiti, and respect the right of the Haitian people for self-determination. So if you are around, please come and join us. We will stay in touch with you. We will send you a link to a recording of this webinar, and we'll share with you other ideas. What can we do to change US policy in Haiti? So thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.